So we're making apple pie. Actually got homegrown apples. So these apples are from my mother-in-law's garden. They turned out absolutely beautiful this year, and I'm assuming that's because we had a really hot summer and the apples really thrived. So let's get on with the recipe.
I really need you to hear what I'm saying.
So I'm just gonna weigh my apples. I'll just weigh them with the skin on because it's not a big deal. Altogether we need 1 kilo of apples, so that's quite a bit. It doesn't matter if you're slightly above or slightly below, that's okay. 1,050 grams, and 50 grams over is not really much, so I'm just going to use this amount of apples. So these apples are quite big. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, okay? I have no idea what variety they are, but they're very beautiful and delicious. Let's start by peeling our apples, and then we're going to cut some. So these apples are actually pink inside, which are really nice. So I've peeled mine, beautiful pink apple, gorgeous. Cut our apples in half. And we don't really need to cut these very thinly, okay? We want some nice chunkiness, we want some nice texture in our pie. So we're gonna cut them into like, kind of like cubes. So let's core it first. So we get rid of the center bit where the seeds are and cut off that end bit as well. And you cut your apples however you're comfortable cutting them, okay? So, and then we're gonna go kind of like, let's say like inch size pieces. Yeah, this is the size that we are looking for. So they're roughly about 1 inch big, okay? Bob them into our bowl. So we'll just do that and just carry on doing that. So I am done with cutting mine. These are absolutely beautiful apples. What you need now is a very large tray, one that's going to be big enough to fit all your apples on, okay? We're also going to get some kitchen roll, and we're going to put our kitchen roll onto our tray. We're going to do a couple of layers, because we want the kitchen roll to absorb the moisture from the apples. If you are worried about them going brown, what you can do at this point is put a little bit of lemon juice on them, which I am going to do. So we're going to go with a tablespoon of lemon juice onto the apples. Hands in here and just coat them a little bit with that lemon juice, okay? Just lay your apples onto the kitchen paper, spread them out, and we're going to leave them here. And the paper towel will basically absorb some of the moisture from them, and this will basically help when we are baking it, because obviously we don't want them to release too much moisture as it's baking, because that will make our pastry go soggy. So to prevent our pastry from going soggy, we're going to allow some of the moisture to be sucked out by the paper towel. We're just going to put these aside for a second while we prepare the pastry now. I'm going to be using a food processor to make my pastry. You can use a large mixing bowl. You need to put your blade in your food processor, okay? And then you need to put your scale underneath your food processor. Put scales on. First thing we're going to weigh into our food processor for our pastry is the plain flour. We need 400 grams of this. It's quite a big batch of pastry, and this is because obviously we're going to roll it out for the actual pie tin, but then we're also going to need a lid as well. And then the next thing we're going to add in is our icing sugar. This is going to sweeten our pastry a little bit. So we need 50 grams of this. And then we're also going to go in with a whole block of unsalted butter. And it's best when you're making short crust pastry that it's cold straight out of the fridge. Can't obviously put the whole block in there. That's just going to break the blades on the food processor. So let's move this aside for a second. And then we're just going to cut our butter up into small pieces, okay? Butter going in. I'm just going to break these in half again because they are still a little bit big. So this is 250 grams of cold unsalted butter. And we're going to pulse this. Now pulsing means that we're going to blend it in short bursts. We're not going to do it in one full go. And that will obviously help make the breadcrumb consistency that we're looking for. Basically just on and off. It's a bit loud, I'm sorry. Apologies. You can put your volume a bit down if you want to. And we just keep pulsing it until it becomes like breadcrumbs, okay? So now we have this. Don't have any large chunks of butter left. I'm just going to give it a check. Okay, I'm just going to look through and see. Make sure there's no big chunks of butter left. Now we're going to add our eggs in there. A little bit of egg for egg wash. Okay, so we're going to save some of this egg for egg wash instead of beating a whole separate egg and wasting it for the egg wash. We've cracked both of our eggs into a bowl. We're just going to whisk them together a little bit. Then we're going to pour most of this into the pastry, but we're going to save about a tablespoon behind just so that we can use it for an egg wash later, and we don't have to beat a whole nother egg just for the egg wash. Okay, so most of this will go into the pastry, and just save about a tablespoon of it behind. Okay, we put our lid back on, and then we're going to pulse this again until it mostly comes together, and then we're going to put the rest of it together, and we're going to add some water if we need to. Okay, we're going to try and put it together with just the egg, and then if we feel like it needs some cold water to bind it a bit more, then we will add some cold water. You can see the dough forming here. So in my opinion, that has come together quite nicely, and I don't feel like I need any water in there. But if you feel like yours is a little bit dry, then you feel free to add some water in there. Oh look, can you see? It's come together quite nicely. It's got enough moisture in there. I don't believe it needs any water. We basically need to chill the dough ever so slightly before we use it. We're going to tip it over into some cling film. You need enough cling film to wrap the pastry in. Okay, it's important when you're making short crust pastry not to overwork your dough, because then it just goes kind of chewy instead of crispy. You're going to work ever so little, just a little bit. Okay, just bring it together. You're not kneading this. That is pretty much your pastry ready. Okay, wrap it in 2 parts because we need most of it for the base and then some of it for the lid. So we're going to keep 2/3 of it for the base and then about 1/3 for the lid. So just guesstimate it a little bit. So we're going to wrap it up into our cling film. Just shape it into a disc and flatten it so slightly so that it's easier to roll later on. Our lid pastry, and just again flatten it and form it into a disc shape. So this is going to go in the freezer now for about 5 to 10 minutes, not too long, just whilst we prep the rest of the stuff. If you were at home normally you could just put it in the fridge for about 15 to 20 minutes if you have time. So we're going to pop this in the freezer. Put our fairly dried apples into our bowl again. As you can see from our wet paper towels, there is quite a bit of moisture that came out of those apples, so that is a good thing. We're going to need our scale again to weigh in the sugar. Our soft brown sugar, now you can use either dark or light, it's totally up to you. It's 75 grams of soft brown sugar, so make sure your scale is on 0 and then you're weighing in your soft brown sugar, 75 grams. Put our scale back on 0. I'm going to add 75 grams of just regular white sugar. You can also add caster sugar if you want to instead of the regular sugar, but regular sugar works absolutely fine. We're just doing half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and now we're going to add in some plain flour. So put your scale back to 0 again, so 50 grams of plain flour. So now we're going to give this a good toss. Make sure that all our apples are coated in all the sugar and the spices and the flour. Big spoon, wooden spoon, whatever is easy for you, and you're literally just going to mix everything really well. I'm going to have to transfer this to a bigger bowl, otherwise I'm not going to be able to mix it in properly, am I? Sorry guys. I do like to use a see-through bowl so you can see what's going on, but in this case I don't think it's going to work. Fortunately my larger ones are not see-through. I'm just going to end up using my mixer's bowl. All those in here. It smells so good. So let's get stuck right in. Just make sure every single apple slice is coated. That looks good to me. So that is what your filling should look like when you are done mixing. We're finally ready to preheat our oven. 170 fan, 190 no fan, gas mark 5. This is my pie dish. Now we're ready to roll our pastry, so let's go grab it. If your pastry feels a bit too hard, you can just work it a little bit in your hand just to warm it up ever so slightly, or you can just leave it on your worktop before you start rolling it out, just so it softens up ever so slightly. Okay, so I have this really fancy rolling pin that I was gifted by a friend. Don't break stuff. It's a Joseph rolling pin, and it has these round circular bits to bob on the end, and that kind of basically keeps your pastry even when you roll it out. So it's kind of fancy. If you really want to buy something like this and you're really into trying to get an even pastry finish, you can actually buy this. The link is on my Amazon page. So we're going with 4 millimeters So you can just eyeball it, guys. You don't have to use fancy gadgets. And just dust it, your work surface, generously with the flour, and this will avoid the pastry sticking to your surface. And a good idea to put some flour on your actual rolling pin as well, to avoid the pastry from sticking to your rolling pin as well. So pastry should be flattened. You should have flattened it already. That goes down. I'm going to flour the top of the pastry as well, again just to prevent the stickage, okay? And then we just go ahead and roll it out. If it's warm, then it'll start sticking to the surface, so when it's cold it won't stick as much, and also it's a lot easier to work with when you're trying to put it into the tray as well. So it is best so that your pastry is cold. You just need to use a little bit of force to get it where you need it to go, okay? Put your rolling pin in the center, okay, and then fold your pastry over your rolling pin, and then you want to put your pie dish in front of you, and then you want to lift your pastry with the rolling pin, okay, put the edge, you want a little bit coming over the edge, and then just drop it over the top of your dish like so. And you can adjust, you can move it around, you can pick it up and move it around a little bit. Again, whilst it's cold, it's very easy to kind of adjust. And you want to push it into the center. Make sure you've got room. So I'm going to move it over this way a little bit because there's not enough excess on that side. So you want excess hanging over the edge. That's really important, okay? You want to get this part of your finger and you want to push the pastry right into the edge of the tray, into your pie dish, okay? We've got a bit of excess which we're going to cut. But I'm going to cut all the excess because we need a bit of overhang. This short crust pastry, it tends to shrink a little bit as it bakes, so it's important to have some overhang on it as well, okay? We're going to leave about 1 inch around the side, and we're going to just cut off some of that excess, okay? Like this. I have a kilo of apples, and we're going to put them straight into the pastry. Spread them out as even as you can. Now we're going to quickly roll the lid. So we're going to use all the excess that we cut off, and we're going to put it into here, and we're going to bring it just together, okay? Just bob it all together and just roll it out. Same thinness as you did with the other one. So to me that looks like the perfect amount of pastry to go on. So again, we're going to bob our rolling pin underneath, bring back our pie, delicious. Bob our pastry on top again. Just make sure that it's aligned. I think we don't have enough that side. There we go. Let's get a bit of that egg wash. Forgot about that bit. The egg wash that we saved, guys. Just get a little bit and put it on the edges. So this is going to glue the top down to the bottom, okay? So do that all the way around. Lift your pastry up and just put a bit of egg wash there on the edge, where the lid and the base is going to stick together, okay? So that is sealed in nice and tight now. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and cut off the excess again, just to make sure both sides are the same. Also, what you can also do is, if you want to, you can crimp the edges. So you just lift it aside like this and just push it around your finger. So you can do that all the way around and just make a design like that. So you just put your finger underneath and just push the pastry around your finger like so, and then that will make a nice crimp all the way around the edge. The thing we need to do is put a few slits in it for the steam to escape while it's baking so it doesn't explode. And then finally we're going to go in with our egg wash on top. You can use milk if you don't have egg, or if you don't like to use egg, just to give it a bit of colour. But that is our apple pie ready to go in the oven. That bakes in our preheated oven for anywhere between 40 and 45 minutes. So 40 and 45 minutes in your preheated oven. The oven temperature was 170 fan, 190 no fan, and a gas mark 5. Gas mark 5, yes. So that goes in the oven. We're putting it in the center of the oven because we don't have one thing in the oven. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Anywhere between 40 and 45 minutes it should take to bake. We want the apples to cook through and we want the pastry to be nice and hard and crispy. So if you feel like it's slightly underdone even after 45 minutes, just leave it in another 5 or 10 minutes just until you think that it's completely cooked. Okay, just don't take it out while it's raw. You can always poke a knife in and just to check to see if the apples, if you think in one of the holes that's at the top, just poke your knife through just to check if your apples are cooked as well. And that's it, that is our apple pie done. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Take care of your families. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bye.